Thank you, Pastor, very much. So now I know we got a little bit of a late start because we were doing a few things in the back. Actually, he was doing a town hall as well. So I thank you guys all for bearing with us. I'm going to keep my remarks really brief because you didn't come here to see me. But I do want to say I've gotten to see the heart of Dr. Ben Carson. I got to travel behind the scenes with him every time he comes in the state. And you hear all kinds of stuff from candidates. You hear one candidate attacking, then you hear one candidate saying, I'm not attacking, but they're doing it behind the scenes or whatever it may be. Ben Carson is the genuine article in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the car, and right up here. So I want you to welcome Dr. Ben Carson, a man of great faith, a man who stood on life and his convictions and is ready to be your next president.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for a very warm welcome in a very cold place. But, you know, I'm always delighted. One of the things I enjoy about coming to Iowa is that you actually get to be up close and personal with people. And they actually get a chance to see who you are, to ask questions, and it doesn't have to be filtered through the media, which is a major problem in general. But if you had asked me a few years ago, do you think you'll ever run for public office? I would have said no. Why would anybody want to get into the field of politics? You know, it's a dirty, dirty business. And when you can have a nice, peaceful, relaxing life, why would you want to do such a silly thing? But, you know, sometimes events occur in your life that change things around. And for me, that occurred when I was asked to speak at the 2013 prayer breakfast. And I thought it was kind of strange because I had spoken in 1997 at the prayer breakfast when Clinton was president. And I wasn't aware that anyone ever did it twice. And then I found out that one person had done it twice, and that was Billy Graham. Then I was really suspicious. I said, Lord, what are you up to here? What do you want me to do here? And, you know, I accepted, but I said, you're supposed to say something to the people of America. But I wasn't sure what it was. And I really didn't know until the morning of the prayer breakfast, which caused some consternation to the White House because they wanted to see the script. They wanted to know what I was going to say. And I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. I don't have a script. They said, you're not going to embarrass the president, are you? I said, moi? Why would I said, I didn't have no intention of doing such a thing. Well, at any rate, I guess it probably did embarrass him a little bit. But, you know, it really wasn't about him. It was about us. It was about America. It was what was happening to our country, the greatest country on the planet, and how it was rapidly changing. If someone 30 years ago had come to you and tried to describe America today, you would say, no, you're wrong. That's not happening in our country. That's how rapidly the changes have taken place. And I, for one, like America. I like, you know, the values and the principles that I learned as a young person. I love the concept of being compassionate toward other people. And I love the concept of fairness and treating everybody the same. And I love the concept of being able to live according to your faith and not having people suppress your belief system. You know, those are the kinds of things that made us into a great nation. And I think we make a grave mistake when we're willing to give them away for the sake of political correctness. And if we're willing to stand up for what we believe in, America, I think, will continue to be a land of promise. It was certainly a land of promise for me. You know, I wanted to be a doctor. Now, Anybody who had seen me as a youngster, they would say, that's nice, but, this guy, a doctor, are you kidding me? There's no way it's ever going to happen. Because, I wasn't a very good student. In fact, my nickname was Dummy. That's what everybody called me. I remember once we were having an argument in the schoolyard about who was the dumbest kid in the school. And it wasn't a big argument because they all agreed it was me. But then somebody tried to extend the argument to who was the dumbest person in the world. And I said, wait a minute. There are billions of people in the world. And they said, yep, and you're the dumbest one. So we had a rather vigorous argument. But unfortunately, that afternoon we had a math quiz. And I had a basic philosophical disagreement with the math teacher who thought you needed to know your timetables. And as far as I was concerned, they were printed on the back of the notebooks, so you could consult them anytime you wanted them, so why memorize them? Well, I couldn't look at that during the test, so I got a 0. And, you had to pass your paper to the person behind you. They would correct it, give it back to you. Teacher would call your name out loud. You had to report your score out loud. Not a problem if you got a 95 or 100. Major problem if, like me, you got a 0 and just had an argument about who was the dumbest person in the world. So, and I knew they were going to laugh hysterically when I said 0, so I started scheming. I said, I know what I'll do. When the teacher calls my name, I'll mumble. And she'll think I said one thing, and the girl behind me will think I said something else. So when she called my name, I said, And she said, 9? Benjamin, you got 9 right? Oh, this is wonderful. I knew you could do it if you just applied yourself. Class, this is a banner day. Benjamin got 9 right. It had 30 questions. But she was just so happy that I had gotten 9 right. And finally, the girl behind me just couldn't take it any longer. And she stood up and she said, he said, none. Well, they were rolling in the aisles. They were just beside themselves. And if I could have disappeared into thin air, never to be heard from in the history of the world, I would gladly have done so. But I couldn't. So I had to sit there and act like it didn't bother me. But it did. It bothered me a lot. Not enough to make me study, but it bothered me a lot, But, the kind of student that I was, it reminds me a lot of some of the people that I encounter today. Do you ever look at some of those man on the street interviews or Water's World and stuff? They ask just such basic questions, and people look like you came from Mars. They have no clue what's going on. This is a big problem. 20% of people who enter high school in our country today do not graduate. That's a problem because, you see, education, it's the great divide. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background is or your economic background. You get a good education, you write your own ticket. And we must really begin to emphasize that again in this country, particularly in the information age, the technological age in which we live. It didn't matter as much when we were an agrarian society. During the agricultural age, we could produce more corn, wheat, and barley than anybody. We were known as the breadbasket of the world. During the industrial age, we could outproduce anybody. Washing machines, cars, guns, whatever. But now we're in a different age where knowledge is power. And we have got to begin to emphasize it. Our founders, and particularly Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, said that our freedom and our system is based upon a well-informed and educated populace. Why was that so important? Because he said if we ever became anything other than that, the nature of the country would quickly change. Why? Because people would be easily manipulated by the media, by slick politicians, and they would continue to control the dynamic. You can't do that with well-educated people and with well-informed people. We have too many people in our society who just read headlines or listen to pundits without finding out what's going on themselves, without analyzing things themselves. You know, I was amused yesterday. I looked at a left-wing newspaper article. You know, I do that to amuse myself sometimes. And it said, Carson wants to kill tens of thousands of children. You know, based on the debate the other night when Hugh Hewitt asked me that question, and the audience started booing him. And I said, you got it, talking to the audience. Well, of course, they say, he's saying, you got it. Yes, he wants to kill the kids. And they knew better than that. But, you know, that stuff does work on low information people and people who don't think for themselves. And that's one of the ways that the establishment and the media have been able to exert mind control over people. It is my fervent hope and prayer that people recognize during the upcoming election that we can't do that anymore. That we have got to be informed. We have got to know what's going on. We cannot be manipulated by the political class or by the media, or we will make a mistake that will lead us down the same path that we have been going, but we can't go down that path much further without turning into something else. Well, you know, fortunately for me, there I was, this horrible student, uninformed, not getting the kind of education I wanted, but my mother believed in me. My mother came from a huge rural family, had only a third-grade education. You know, she and my father got divorced once she discovered that he was a bigamist. She had gotten married when she was 13. But even though she couldn't get very good jobs, she worked as a domestic. And she would leave the house at 5 in the morning, going from job to job to job, get back home at midnight. And her friends were always saying, you don't have to do that. You have 2 kids. You can get aid to dependent children. But she didn't like the ideal of being dependent. And she wanted to do it on her own. And she was very thrifty. You know, she would go to the Goodwill and buy a pair of trousers with a big hole in the knee, back before that was fashionable. And then she would, get patches and put them on both sides. And people would say, where'd you get those pants? And, she would take us out to farmers, farm in a Sunday morning, and we'd knock on farmers' doors. And she'd say, can we pick 4 bushels of your apples or corn, beans, tomatoes? 3 for you and 1 for us. They always liked that deal. She would bring the stuff home and can it, just stretch money further than anybody possibly could. In fact, I believe that with her 3rd-grade education, if she was Secretary of the Treasury, we would not be in a deficit situation. Because, there's something about common sense. It seems to have left us. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have it, don't spend it. It seems like such a simple concept, and yet something that we've lost contact with. Well, at any rate, as she worked as a domestic, she looked around and she saw that the well-to-do people that she worked for didn't spend all day watching TV. And they had lots of books. And she prayed for God for wisdom, and he gave her the wisdom that said, the reason they're doing well is because they study and they're well-read. So she came home and imposed that on us. And we were not happy campers, let me tell you. Turning off the TV and making us read books and submit to her book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And, she would put little check marks and highlights and all kinds of stuff. And I was not at all happy about this, I got to tell you. But back in those days, you had to do what your parents told you. There was no social psychologist saying let the kid express themselves. So, we had to do it. But I started learning all kinds of things. She was smart enough not to tell us what we had to read. And I loved animals. So I read every animal book in the Detroit Public Libraries. And then I went to plants. And then I went to rocks because we lived near the railroad tracks. And what is there along the railroad tracks? Rocks. I would collect boxes of rocks, bring them home, get out my geology books, and start studying. And pretty soon I could tell you the name of any rock, where it came from, how it was formed. Still in the 5th grade. Still a dummy. And one day the 5th grade science teacher walked in. He held up a big black shiny rock. He says, "Can anybody tell me what this is?" Well, I never raised my hand. I never answered any questions. So I waited for one of the smart kids to raise their hand, and none of them did. And I waited for one of the dumb kids to raise their hand, and none of them did. And I said, "This is my big chance." And up went my hand, and everybody turned around. They said, "Benny's got his hand up. Oh, this is going to be so good." They were just ready to laugh hysterically. And the teacher was shocked, and he said, "Benjamin?" I said, "Mr. Jake, that's obsidian." There was silence in the room because it sounded good. And they didn't know whether they should be impressed or whether they should be laughing. And he broke the silence. He said, "That's right, it is obsidian." And I said, "Obsidian is formed after a volcanic eruption, and the lava flows down and hits the water. There's a supercooling process. The elements coalesce. The air is forced out. The surface." They're all staring at me. They couldn't believe all this geological information spewing forth from the mouth of the dummy. But I was perhaps the most amazed person because it dawned on me at that moment that I was no dummy. I said, "The reason you knew the answers is because you were reading the books." I said, "What if you read books about all your subjects? Can you imagine what the effect would be?" And from that point on, no book was safe in my grasp. If I had 5 minutes, I was reading a book. Waiting for the bus, reading a book. On the bus, reading a book. In the bathroom, reading a book. At the kitchen table, my mother would say, "Benjamin, put the book down and eat your food." I was always reading. And within the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. Much to the consternation of all the students who used to laugh and call me stupid, who were now coming to me saying, "Benny, Benny, Benny, how do you work this problem?" And I'd say, "Sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you." I was perhaps a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But, the fact of the matter is, I had a revolution in my thinking more about what I could do than what I couldn't do. And this is what we must bring back to America. The can-do attitude. The attitude that allowed our early settlers to move from one sea to the other sea across a rough and hostile terrain. People who knew how to build roads and structurally sound bridges and containment facilities and dams, who knew how to invent things when a problem arose. That was the can-do attitude that characterized the rapid rise of America from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world. The problem is, now it's being replaced with the "what can you do for me" attitude. And that is what we must fight. A lot of people, accuse me of being hypocritical. They say, "You grew up poor. You must have benefited from some government programs. And now you want to take all the government programs away and all the safety nets," which, of course, is nothing more than a blatant lie. They do that because they try to demonize people because they don't want people to listen to you. I don't want to take away government programs that are safety nets. But what I do want to do is provide ladders of opportunity to allow people to move from a state of dependency to independence and being part of the fabric of America. That's what American exceptionalism is all about. And the people who best do that are we the people. We are the ones who can best take the indigent in our society and give them the opportunities to climb out. Government doesn't do a good job of that. And it was never the government's responsibility. The government needs to go and read the Constitution because it doesn't say that that is their job. Now, maybe they did read it. Maybe they read the preamble. And one of the things that it says is the government's job is to promote the general welfare. But that doesn't mean put everybody on welfare. That's what they don't know. And, you know, one of the things that I think the government could do, though, that would be extraordinarily helpful is recognize that overseas there's over $2.1 trillion of American money. We need to bring that money back here. But the reason it doesn't come back is because we have the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. So I can remember many an afternoon sitting around the board table when I was on the Kellogg board or the Costco board, thinking about what are we going to do with all these billions of dollars overseas since we can't bring them back here? Well, what I would do is offer a 6-month hiatus, tax-free, to allow that money to be repatriated in our country, with the only stipulation being that 10% of it had to be used in enterprise zones and to create jobs for people who are on welfare or unemployed. You want to talk about a stimulus. That would be the biggest stimulus since FDR's New Deal program, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers one penny. That is easy. That is low-hanging fruit. That's the kind of thing that we need to be doing as a nation to make all the difference in the world. And the thing is, it now will get our companies starting to think, getting back into the mode of thinking about how do you invest in your community? How do you invest in your neighborhood? How do you invest in your city? That's the kind of thing that gets us all on the same page and starts to reduce some of the animosity. Because one of the other things that I believe that really threatens our nation is divisiveness. And, we have a war on women, racial wars, income wars, age wars, religion wars. You name it, we're warring about it. Everybody's at each other's throats. We hate people who disagree with us. Have you noticed when you go on the internet and you read an article and you go to the comment section, you can't get 5 comments down before people are calling each other ridiculous names. Where did that come from? Where you want to hurt and destroy people with whom you disagree. I'll tell you where it did not come from. It did not come from our Judeo-Christian values. It came from something else. And we need to get rid of it and recognize that our strength is in our unity. And that's why we're called the United States of America and not the divided States of America. And it will make the biggest difference in the world because right now we are in a situation where radical Islamic jihadists want to destroy us. Why would we make their job easier by trying to destroy each other? It doesn't make any sense. And we have to be smarter than that and recognize that those who are trying to divide us are actually our enemies. But back to the jihadists. We need to stop playing games with these people. They represent an existential threat to us. I think it's important that we understand what drives them. I would recommend that you go and read up on Muhammad and, his time in Mecca. He wasn't a very popular figure there, by the way. That might surprise you to know that. It was his uncle who was very popular and kind of shielded him because people didn't like him very much. And when his uncle died, he had to leave, and he went to Medina up north and put together, his armies and they began to destroy people who didn't agree with them. And that was the beginning of, an Islamic part with Sharia that says anybody who doesn't agree with you, you can kill them. Cut their heads off, do all manner of horrible things to them, lie to them, make them pay unreasonable taxes, and it goes on and on, all of which is still going on today. Now, in order for them to export their philosophy, they must have a caliph, sort of like the big cheese, and a caliph has to have a caliphate, which is sort of like his little kingdom. They have to have actual territory. That's what they've developed now. They haven't had a caliph since 1924, Turkey. Now they've got half of Iraq, a third of Syria, and they have footholds in several other places, including Libya, which is particularly dangerous because you go northward from Libya, you get to southern Europe. You go southward, you got Chad and Sudan and Niger, and you begin really to have a very effective way of spreading what you're doing. And that's why, if we really want to defeat them, we need to take away their caliphate. We take the land away from them to delegitimize them even in their own eyes. And then they don't have the propaganda tools that they have. Now, here's one of the real advantages of taking that away from them. They hide amongst the populace because they figure we won't bomb the populace. But if we start taking the land from them, they have to come out and fight us, or they have to concede. And I don't think they're going to just concede it. When they come out to fight us, we take them out. About a month ago, we took back Sinjar. They had taken that city. ISIS had taken that city. But working with the Kurds, with our embedded special ops people, we choked off the access routes to Sinjar. That weakened the city. And then we were able to go in with the Kurds and our special ops, fortified by our Air Force, and take that city. That's a model that works extremely well. You can use that same model with some of the other cities. And we need to attack their command and control centers, like Raqqa, Mosul to lesser extent. Those are the places that we can really squeeze them out of by cutting off the supply routes. There are only 4 major supply routes into Raqqa. Cut those off. Soften that city. Make it untenable for them to live there. Chase them out of there. And wherever they go, keep chasing them. And if they're always on the run, they don't have time to be plotting things over here in this country. That's the best way that we protect ourselves, by eliminating them over there. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to protect ourselves here. And our best defense are the American people. We need to teach the American people how to react to a terrorist threat if they're in a situation. I'll tell you one thing that doesn't work, and that is taking the arms away from the American people. That makes absolutely no sense at all. Because, all that does is make you into a sitting duck. And, at San Bernardino, the semi-automatic weapons were already illegal in that area. The magazine clips were already illegal. It was already a gun-free zone. Did that stop it? Of course not. That is just asinine to think that that's something that's going to work. But teaching the people how to react, that is important. Going after their internet communications, being able to monitor them very carefully. I mean, this whole concept of, not looking at the Facebook posts of people who are trying to get into this country. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is beyond belief stupid. It just boggles the mind. But we need to use the internet effectively, not only to screen people, but to countermand the propaganda that they're putting out. We need to go to the servers where they are putting out their propaganda and shut those down. We need to use cyber warfare to eliminate their ability to spread their propaganda as much as possible. Some people say, well, that's dirty pool. Well, they're dirty players, so we use dirty tactics on them. Not a problem. You see, you cannot fight a politically correct war. These are people who want to destroy us. These are people who want to destroy our children and our grandchildren. And we have to understand that they are every bit as dangerous as the Nazis and other people who we have fought against in the past. And if we sit back and relax and try to play nice, and politically correct, we will do that to our detriment. And a lot of people say, well, but you're not tough. You're not tough enough to deal with these people, because somebody's managed to convince people that only tough people are people who scream and gesticulate and do things like that. I'll tell you what toughness really is. Toughness is being able to accomplish things, particularly against great odds. And I would say, if you go back and you look at my life versus a bunch of people who are running for president who talk. They talk a lot, but they haven't really accomplished very much. And not to brag, but just to say, there's a reason that I have 67 honorary doctorate degrees. It's the highest honor that a university gives out. They don't give those to weak people, believe me. And there's a reason that the Library of Congress, on the occasion of its 200th anniversary, picked me as one of 89 living legends. They don't do that for weak people. There's a reason I have the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor a civilian can get in our land. Not done for weak people. There's a reason that the Carson Scholars Fund has won major national awards that are only given to one organization. Candy and I started that. That doesn't happen for weak people. It happens for people who know how to who do things. There's a reason that a number of pediatric neurosurgical techniques been developed that are now used all over the world. Doesn't happen for weak people. So it's not so much the talking as it is the doing that matters. And right now, we need doing. And before I take some questions, I just want to say a couple things. It is extremely important that we as Americans recognize that we have an identity. Have you noticed that there's such a thing as the American way, as an American dream? What other country has a way or a dream? And it's something that we need to be extremely proud of and something we need to protect. We need to know who we are. We need to have a vision, and we can't be giving away who we are so that people can say that we're nice people, that we're politically correct people. And particularly our faith. Pull out your wallet and take out any bill, and it says, "In God we trust." We need not be ashamed of the fact that we trust in God. When you look at our flag, and we say our pledge, and we say we are one nation under God, we need not be ashamed. We need not let anybody make us self-conscious about that. We look at our founding document, the Declaration of Independence. It says we were given certain unalienable rights by our Creator, a.k.a. God, we need not be ashamed of our relationship with God, because that's what gives us our values. And I know that President Obama said we're not a Judeo-Christian nation. But he doesn't get to decide what kind of nation we are. We get to decide what kind of nation we are. And it was Thomas Jefferson who said that we would reach this point in our country. We, the people, would not be vigilant. We would not be paying attention to what was going on. We would be more interested in the football game and on who's done Dancing with the Stars. He didn't use those two examples, but he said we wouldn't be paying attention, and as a result, the government would do what all governments do naturally, and that is to grow and to infiltrate and to dominate us as people. But he said just before we turned into something else, the people of America would recognize what was going on. And they would awaken, and they would stand up, and they would regain control of America. I say now is the time to do that. Thank you very much.
I'd like to reintroduce myself. I'm Candy Carson, and I approve this message.
All right. Now we have time for a few questions. Yes. Okay. Okay. Her comment was Islamic indoctrination in our schools. Is that going on? Yes, it is. One of the reasons that I called for an investigation into the Council on American Islamic Relations is because I'm concerned about what's going on in this country. The Muslim Brotherhood, CARE, other organizations that have been shown to have connections to organizations that are supporting terrorist activities, supporting Hamas. That's the way you're really supposed to pronounce it. Hamas. Anyway, and other organizations, throughout the land. And if you go back and look at the Holy Land Foundation trial, one of the things that was discovered was an explanatory memorandum that told about what the plans were for some of these organizations in America, how they wanted to infiltrate our society, infiltrate our schools, gain powerful positions, and commit what they call civilization jihad, and be able to basically revolutionize who we are. And they said it would be easier in America than you think, because the Americans would be so concerned about political correctness that they would allow things to happen that were antithetical to their own principles. We have to be smarter than that. Teddy Roosevelt, I think, put it best in 1907. He said, "We are a land of immigrants, and we welcome anybody from anywhere as long as they want to be Americans, and as long as they will accept American principles." That's what's important. Another question. Yes. Okay, what needs to be done with our education system to create those ladders of opportunity for people? Well, We don't need Common Core, I'll tell you that. That is not necessary. But we do need excellent education. And like I said, that's the great divide in our nation. We've demonstrated that the best educated people are the kids who get homeschooled. The next best educated, private schools. The next best, charter schools. The least best, public schools. What that says to me is that we need to provide school choice and utilizing vouchers or what have you to allow people to move into situations that actually have good educational outcomes. That will force the ones that don't have good educational outcomes to get on the bandwagon and find a way to improve, because they will either improve or they will cease to exist. Either one is okay with me, because we need to make sure that we educate our people. We have to recognize for every person that goes down that path of self-destruction, that's a person that we have to be afraid of and protect our families from. A person that we have to pay for in the penal system or the welfare system. And if we can prevent that from happening, that's one more tax-paying, productive member of society who may discover a new energy source or the cure for cancer. We can't afford to throw away any of our people. We only have 330 million people. China has 1.4 billion. India has over 1 billion. We have to compete with them, so we have to develop all of our people. It's absolutely essential. We also need to use technology. There are computer programs that can look at the way a kid solves 5 algebra problems. Based on that, it knows what they don't know, and it can tutor them and bring them up to speed so they can solve those problems. Same thing a good algebra teacher can do. But the teacher can do it for one person at a time. The computer system can do it for a whole class, a whole school, a whole city, a whole state, a whole nation. That's what we need to take advantage of. Virtual classrooms also, we can put the very best teachers in front of 1 million students instead of 30 students. We need to take advantage of our technology, particularly to get caught up in STEM, because we're pretty far behind other industrialized nations. We should never be behind in anything, to be honest with you. We need to, as long as I'm talking about that, we need to be thinking about what we need to do to harden our electric grid, because we're very, very vulnerable in that setting. And we're not doing anything about it. We need to get back into space, because right now we're paying the Russians $77 million every time we want to send one of our astronauts up to the space station. That's pretty expensive fare. And but worse than that, you think about what came out of the space program. All of these inventions, all of the innovation, the stuff that kept us far ahead in terms of our military technology. They've caught up with us now because we're not doing that. Your cell phone came out of that. There's so many things that came out of that. And in the future, he who controls space will control the earth. We absolutely cannot get behind in this area. Yes. What could you say to them that will change their mind? You can tell them to go to bencarson.com and start reading for themselves and seeing directly what we stand for, and not listen to the media. The media saddens me in this country, because they are the only business entity that is protected by our Constitution. And there's a reason for that. It's because they were supposed to be on the side of the people. And they were supposed to be truthful and not take sides. And they have lost that. They have lost all of their integrity. And it completely distorts the system. And, I hope and pray, particularly some of the young journalists who are coming up, will recognize that they play an important role in the strength and the freedom of this country, and stop taking sides and using ideology in their reporting and start doing things the way they're supposed to. You know, I think back to somebody like Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite was a left-wing radical, but you would have never known it because he was a professional, and we need to bring professionals back. What can we do about gays in our military? Yes. Well, what I have said about that is we really shouldn't even be talking about people's sexual orientation in the military. You know, my philosophy has always been that marriage is between one man and one woman. That's what the Bible says. That's what God established. That has been human tradition for a long period of time. I believe that all Americans are protected by our Constitution, including gay people. And I believe everybody has equal rights, but I don't believe anybody has extra rights. Nobody gets to change everything for everybody else. That's where the problem comes in. And if two people, regardless of what their status is, if they want to live together, if they want to get legal documents that allow them to have visitation rights and share property, I don't have any problem with that. They can do whatever they want. They just don't get to change everything for everybody else. And I don't think that our military should be a laboratory for sexual experimentation. They have an important job. Their job is to protect us. We don't need to be entering all kinds of nefarious things that distract them from doing their duty. That's what keeps us free. And all of this silliness and this PC stuff, it is going to destroy us if we don't wake up pretty soon. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I will tell you, Candy was not enthusiastic about this until we had grandchildren. Once we had our granddaughters, she looked into those sweet little faces, and she said, we got to do this. We cannot allow this country to deteriorate and them not have a future. That's what it's all about. Well, you know, our military is excellent, historically. And they've been fighting in wars every average 15 to 20 years since our inception, and they are the reason that we are still alive and well. They deserve a real commander-in-chief that they can respect, but also a commander-in-chief who respects them and will allow them to do what they are trained to do. And I've talked to so many of our military leaders who have quit because they're not respected. And believe me, if you give them a mission and you do not tie their hands behind their back, there is no finer force that exists in the world. And they will be able to do amazing things. And what we really need to do is we need to strengthen their hand. You know, our equipment is archaic, particularly our nuclear arsenal. Our Navy is at its smallest size since 1917, our Air Force since 1940. The sequester has hurt our personnel. We have low morale. At the same time, our enemies are increasing. And you know, if I were in charge of America and I was trying to destroy it, I'll tell you what I would do. I would try to drive wedges between all the people. I would have them all at war with each other. I would increase the debt to unimaginable limits. I would invite people in here from other countries. I would give them all kinds of benefits. I would be trying to get the people in here on all kinds of benefits. I'd want them all on food stamps and everything else. I would be giving them free telephones. I'd be talking about free education and college for everybody. And then I would destroy our military at the same time that our enemies were advancing. That's what I would do. Now, any resemblance to what's actually going on, I'm sure, is coincidental. What would I do for small business and middle class? Well, remember, you know, small business is the backbone of America. 60 to 80% of all employment comes from small business. So it is incredibly important. I would get rid of the regulatory burden that is killing small business. You know, for instance, you know, it used to be a creep, the regulations. Now it's a gallop. They're all over everything. But one example of a regulation, the employer mandate. You know, it used to be when you started a new business in America, you were so proud, and you called up your mom, and you said, "Mom, I started a new business. I got 10 employees." You were so proud. The next year you had 20, then 30, then 40, 45. Oh, better stop. Don't want to hit 50. All of a sudden, all kinds of things kick in. You know, those are back-breaking regulations. And there's thousands of others that are just like them. What I would do is evaluate every single one of those regulations based on cost to benefit ratio. And if the benefit does not justify the cost, you get rid of it. And we need to change the mission of some of the regulators, like the Environmental Protection Agency. They right now are torturing everybody. I would change them to a function of working with business, industry, academia to find the cleanest, most environmentally friendly ways to exploit our tremendous resources. That makes a lot more sense. And that's not a matter of just changing the top level of leadership in those agencies. You have to go down through those agencies. There are people who are entrenched in there for 20, 30 years. They have philosophies that do not benefit the people of America. We have to provide them with an opportunity for alternative employment. Okay, last question. Yes. Okay, he's talking about the Convention of States, Article 5. Yes, we definitely need to do that because we're going to have to get term limits, or we may be able to find another way to do it with some kind of a national referendum, but we definitely need to do it. And the reason that we didn't have term limits in the beginning when our Constitution was put together is because it was an onerous job to come to Washington to serve. And there weren't a lot of perks. And so nobody was going to do it for a second term. You didn't have to worry about that. Obviously, it needs to be updated. There are a lot of things that need to be updated, quite frankly. You know, when our Constitution was put together, you know, lifetime limits, lifetime terms for Supreme Court judges and other federal judges, not a big deal because the average age of death was 47. things have changed. So, I think that probably needs to be updated. When Social Security was put in place, the average age of death was 63. Now it's 80. We have to look at a whole list of things that we have to deal with. And if we do it in a logical way and we do it in a compassionate way, it will be something that works. And that's something that we've lost, particularly in the government. We have these gigantic bureaucracies, and the whole concept of being compassionate and caring about the people has gone right out of the window. And that's why I have said we will have something in a Carson administration, sort of like secret shoppers. And they will be able to evaluate what's going on with these 645 government agencies and sub-agencies. And if people are not doing their job, I think we're going to have to find a way to change things so that we can get rid of those people and put in people who are responsive, because the government works for the people don't work for the government. Thank you all very much.